Hello, my name is Mary McAleney and I'm chair of the board of the Maine Irish Heritage Center. The Maine Irish Heritage Center is located in the former St. Dominic's Church in Portland, Maine. This church, built by Irish immigrants, was the second Catholic church in the state of Maine. In the fall of 2007, the board decided that we would present an annual award called the Claddagh to a citizen of the state of Maine who has contributed to the well-being of our state, the citizen of Irish heritage. The Claddagh, as many of you may know, is a beloved Irish symbol of friendship, loyalty, and love. Over 300 people from far and wide came to celebrate Joe's life and legacy and contribution to the state of Maine. It was an evening we will never forget, so sit back and enjoy.
If we could get you all to take your seats. I see John Kerry out there talking. He'll never sit down. We are making progress. I see we're making progress, but we really can't start the program until people sit down. Thank God for the LaPointe, because now we have some help. Maybe if we turn the lights out, we can get people's attention. I want to welcome you all to the Maine Irish Heritage Center here. St. Dominic's Church, originally built 1822, rebuilt again in 1896, and we are here as a Heritage Center tonight to honor Governor Joseph E Brennan. And just as much really to honor the person who put up with all those many, many races, his wife and our friend Connie Brennan. How did you do it? How did you do it? And for those of you who don't know me, although it looks like pretty much everybody here knows everybody, my name is Jerry Conley Jr. as opposed to Jerry Conley Sr., now known as Senile. This is a very, very special occasion. So I'm first going to call up the Governor of the state of Maine, John Baldacci. Please come on up.
Thank you very much. Jerry Jr., you never have to worry about becoming a judge. Remember, Governor, you used to listen to the introductions, and if they were really good, you'd say, tomorrow morning you're going to make him a judge? Jerry isn't going to have it tomorrow morning. That's right, Governor. And your father's doing a fine job because he's chairman of the Turnpike Authority. First thing he told me after I appointed him chairman, he says, I've never met a toll or a tax that I couldn't like. Great guy. Listen, this is your night, Governor Brennan, and it's also your day. One of the things, as you know, we get to do is to make proclamations. You've got many wonderful and talented friends that are here over a great number of years, and you're going to have a great evening, and it's going to be recorded, which I think is a wonderful tribute to both you and to Connie. And thank you, Connie, for putting up with all of us. You've been a wonderful, stabilizing resource, not just to Joe, but to all of us over the years, and I want to thank you for that. Governor Brennan, he's been a special person to me and my family over the years. When I was in the State Senate, I can remember going down and getting one of many lectures about how you could vote for anything up on the third floor, but there was only one cash register, and it was in the governor's office. You know, I try to give that lesson today, Governor, and they don't listen as well as we listened back then. But now we have no money. We actually have no credit cards. We have nothing to borrow anymore. But you did a great job. Governor Brennan did a tremendous job as governor, and it's something that's not talked about. He came in after some very difficult lean years and a deficit, no money in the reserves, and really did a tremendous job in building it back and making critical investments. And he was one individual who made sure there was widespread economic development throughout the state of Maine. And we have, to honor him today, a proclamation. Whereas Joseph E. Brennan was born in Portland, attended Boston College and the University of Maine School of Law. Whereas Joseph E. Brennan has donated his life to public service as a member of the United States Army, was a Cumberland County District Attorney, Maine State Representative, Maine State Senator, Maine Attorney General, Governor of the State of Maine for 2 terms, and a member of the United States House of Representatives. And whereas Joseph E. Brennan has always displayed a great deal of pride, integrity, and respect, especially when discussing his Irish heritage and his Maine roots. And whereas the Maine Irish Heritage Center is naming an annual award which honors a distinguished Irish American from Maine who has devoted their life to serving our community and state with this award. And whereas the award represents friendship, love, and loyalty, it's fitting that the first recipient of the Maine Irish Heritage Center Award is a man who is always considered the person of the people of the state of Maine, who's been loved by the state of Maine, that he calls Maine his home, and he's been a loyal public servant to the state of Maine. Now, therefore, I, as the Governor of the state of Maine, on November 14, 2008, make this day Governor Joseph E. Brennan Day throughout the state of Maine, and urge all of our citizens here of Maine. Congratulations.
Nice job. Thank you, Governor Baldacci. I would now like to call up Congressman Mike Michaud, who's made a long trip to come to be with us.
Thank you very much, Jerry. And I notice you make reference to the 2nd Congressional District, but need I remind you that you had to go into 2nd Congressional District to get your lovely wife to bring her down to Portland. So, and she has put up with a lot, I can tell you. So, God bless you, Mary. First of all, I want to thank everyone involved in the Maine Irish Heritage Center. Being Franco-American, I feel very strongly about our heritage, and whether it's Franco-American, Italian, or Irish. And I'm very pleased to be here this evening to congratulate Joe Brennan for this distinguished award. When I started in the Maine legislature a number of years ago, I was about 50 pounds lighter, had darker hair, and actually I served under Governor Brennan. And I want to tell you, Governor Brennan, I really appreciate your leadership during my time in the Maine legislature and your continued leadership and public service commitment to the people in the state of Maine and all across this country. You are a true a mentor. I learned a lot from you then and continue to learn a lot from you now. And I can't think of any individual that's more deserving of this award than yourself. So I want to thank you for your long service to this great state and this great nation of ours. And God bless both you and Connie. Have a good evening.
We have a program that we're already behind on because our Irish straw boss, Mary McAleney, she's already kind of giving me dagger looks around here. She said, we'll be eating in 38 minutes. I hope you all ate before you got here, because take a look at this lineup, all right? Most of them cashed a lot of checks courtesy of this guy. They're going to be saying a couple things. First up, we do have a doctor. Dr. Michael Connolly is going to give us a little bit of Irish background.
Good evening, everybody. Joe, congratulations. Well, many of you have been to Galway. Well, the sign should be right. Oh, there it is, right over there. Many of you have been to Galway. When you go to Galway City and you start heading west, you go in through a nice number of small little townlands. You might start off in Barna, and then Spittle, the birthplace of John Ford's father, and a couple of miles beyond that, the birthplace of his mother, Curran. You proceed out a little ways further, and you come to Costello and Inverin, and the way to get out to the Aran Islands. And then there's a crossroads that you come to. If you want to go down to Lettermore and Lettermullen, you take a left. If you want to go way far out in Galway, you take a right. You pass by Rossmuck, go by where Patrick Pearse learned to speak Irish, and eventually you come out to Kilkieran and Carna. Now, once you go that far, you've gone past the place that Joe Brennan's forebears started, Calafinish. Ironically, the same town that my grandfather came from. And Calafinish is a beautiful town, and if you ever go to Calafinish, you'll see why the people from there loved the city of Portland and Munjoy Hill. Well, Joe, I took a look at the city directory, and I wanted to get a sense of what your neighborhood was like growing up. And I looked at the house where his dad was living at 31 Kellogg Street, and there was an Esposito living in the house, I believe. Coleman Mulkern was in the neighborhood. John Ryan and Frank D'Amico. The Kellogg Street Market, which I never really knew about, was just up from you. Run by Gothaldo Amadi. Gabby Cavallaro lived in the area. Mrs. Nora Brennan. Mary Scanlon. Mike Reagan. And across the street, Martin Spaltro. When I talked with somebody at the Maine Historical Society, I said, how would you describe that neighborhood? And they said, a League of Nations. And it was a great place to grow up. And a few years later, I grew up just a couple of streets past there, but a wonderful place. And from 1934 onward, I think that you enjoyed that neighborhood. You enjoyed all the different kind of ethnic cooking, ethnic smells. People were talking all the time, sitting out on their front porches. I just wanted to say that Joe has been a big help to me. When he was governor, one time he was giving a talk, I think it was at the Stevens Avenue Armory, and he mentioned at the time that nobody had really done the history of the Irish in Maine. And I know that that was an inspiration to Jim Monday for his book, and you did write the preface for that book. And it also planted a seed in my mind, and I said, well, if I ever get the opportunity, maybe I could do something along those lines too. So, Joe, you never know when a speech is going to influence somebody, and it certainly did influence me, and I'd like to thank you for it. Congratulations, Joe.
My name is Jim Franciosi, and I'm here this evening to discuss Joe Brennan, the early years. I think I'm qualified for this because Joe and I became friends in 1946 when we both were enrolled at Cathedral Grammar School. The thing I remember about Joe in those years is that being an excellent altar boy, getting all A's in school, and being a fine athlete and captain of our 8th grade basketball team. The one thing that set him apart from the rest of us back then was his tremendous sense of self-confidence. For a boy 12, 13, 14, he always was extremely sure of himself. And I have one quick story that I think will exemplify that fact. In the summer of 1946, we caddied at the Portland Country Club. We were paid $1.25 an hour, and the average tip was 25 cents, so our daily wage was $1.50. And we worked that whole summer. The following summer, which would be the summer of 1947, I says to Joe, are we caddying this year? And he says to me, I don't think so. He says, I'm going down to the unemployment office to try to find a summer job. Now remember, he's 13. I said, the unemployment office, what's that? I never heard of an unemployment. It's a place where they find everyone jobs. And I kind of scratched my head because I had a bunch of uncles who were unemployed. How come they never heard of the unemployment office? So Joe goes to the unemployment office, and because we lived a street apart on Munjoy Hill, Waterville Street, Kellogg Street, I see Joe later in the day, and he says, we're all set. He said, I got us a job at a summer camp in Sebago Lake, and our compensation is going to be $4 a day And it's all we have to do is rake leaves and paint buildings. So meet me Monday morning on the corner of Smith and Cumberland Avenue, where we're going to be picked up and taken to the camp. Bring a lunch. So of course, Monday morning comes, we're down there, a station wagon picks us up, takes us to way up in Sebago Lake somewhere, to a camp called Arundel Aquila. It was a combination boys and girls camp. The gentleman that was driving the vehicle says his name and said he was a lawyer from Massachusetts and he was the owner of the camp. When we get to the camp, we're assigned to another gentleman who was going to be our foreman. We never saw her leave, and we never saw her paintbrush. What we saw was picks and shovels and boulders and building bridges. So about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Joe disappears. So he comes back, and I said, "Where you been?" He said, "I went to see the boss. As of tomorrow, we get $5 a day." Now this is a lawyer from Massachusetts who's dealing with 13-year-old Joe Brennan. So another couple of days go by, the work gets harder. So Joe again disappears. He comes back and he says, "I said, where you been?" He says, "As of tomorrow, we get $6 a day." Another day goes by, he disappears. I says, "Boy, this is going to be great. Tomorrow I'm making $7. He comes back and I said, "What happened?" He said, "We're fired." I said, "Why? How come?" He said, "We're troublemakers. You don't want us on the premises." Okay? So of course I'm upset. And Joe's, I don't know what he said, but he said something like, "Listen, no matter what the money is, we're being taken advantage of, and we don't belong here." That's Joe Brennan, huh? Always, always, always looking out for the other guy. Thank you.
I'm Joseph Smith, and I'm here to tell a few stories about when Joseph was growing up. Jimmy Franciosi mentioned self-confidence. Joseph has always possessed great self-confidence. When he was 5 years old, he went to school for the first time, and his neighbor, I believe her name was Mrs. Moore, said, "Joey, who's your teacher?" Joe Brennan said, "I don't have a teacher. I teach myself." When he was about 10 years old, there's a story of my grandparents, Catherine and John, had scraped together some money to give Joseph the opportunity to spend a week or two at Camp Gregory in Gray. They borrowed a car and drove Joseph up there, and then they may have taken a little while coming home, because by the time they got back to Kellogg Street, Joseph was already there. He didn't like St. Gregory's. He did not like being away from home. So as soon as they had turned the other way, he took it upon himself and hitchhiked home. We in the family are very proud of Joseph, and we very grateful to have him in the family, and we love him very much, and he's a man of great respect and quiet dignity. Thank you.
I didn't really know Joe that well until we got into the legislature together. And he and I and Nick Danton, God bless him, and Joe D'Alfonso, God bless him too, the four of us went up and took an apartment up at the Holiday Inn that was under construction. And we lived there for 4 years, $7 a night for each one of us. And it was great. We used to get $12 a day subsidy, $7 for the rent and $5 for breakfast, lunch, and supper. And believe it or not, in those days you could get by on it. You were a little skimpy, but it was good. But anyway, I got to know Joe very well in the period of time that we sort of roomed together up there. And Joe stayed around in the House for a few terms. He left the House, I think, after about 4 terms, went back to run for county attorney. He stayed for the county attorney for 2 years, and then he decided to come back to Augusta as a senator. And he became the minority floor leader, as I called it, the Democratic floor leader. We put those minorities away. I said we were all born minorities. We were Democrats until we died. But but Joe and I became great friends, and while he was there, he decided he would make his first attempt to run for governor. He ran, obviously, against George Mitchell. And those were the days when every dime counted, and we went all over the state 2 or 3 times. And unfortunately, Joe didn't make that race. He lost. But he came back, and Ed Kelleher, Pete Danton, myself, and a few other Irishmen, I'm sorry, Pete, but a few more decided we needed an attorney general, and we had a great one that just lost the primary, and we got him as the attorney general. He stayed there for 4 years, John, and then Jim Longley became governor, and he said he was going to serve 1 term, and then Joe became governor. And that was the beginning of a whole new life for all of us. But I want you to know one thing. Joe, I have given you, over the 40 years I've known you, I have given you the best years of my life. Better than that, my 12 kids have given you the best years of their youth. And I just want to tell you one thing. If we had to make a change just one more time, we wouldn't give it a second thought. We would be there. God bless you,
Good evening. Governor Brennan, Connie, my name's Arthur Stolfen, for those of you who don't know me. Some of you probably still have splinters in your hands as a result of the work that we did. It was nice to see so many friends and to have such a warm welcome that I had this evening. As a result, I have bad news for 2 people who are here tonight. I'm now announcing my candidacy for Attorney General of the state of Maine. 35 years ago, in August of 1973, a small group of people helped Joe put on the first of 17 annual Joe Brennan picnics. Most of them were held at Thomas Point Beach. We used to have a public large container for the public with soda. We also had a secret can for non-soda type beverages. I'm not even sure it was quite legal, but the statute of limitations has run. It would be interesting to know how many future justices went to the private supply. At that picnic, one of the volunteers was a young man named David Flanagan. It was his job to direct traffic. He did it with enthusiasm because he had to tell everybody to go to the right. With the money that we raised, we were able to put on the first announcement for governor. One of the first things we had to do was to produce a banner that would decorate the hall. David Redderman and I went down to the studio of a local artist, also known as the Eagles Club. We brought the boys around. We cleared the pool table. You know, it's also known as a Brennan playpen. Stretched out the banner, and the fellow with a beverage in one hand and a brush in the other painted the first banner. Meanwhile, over on Pleasant Avenue at Tom Flanagan's house, clotheslines were being strung and sheets were put up on the clotheslines. Somebody got out a brownie and took a picture of Joe Brennan. It was developed in a sink. They were hung up to dry on a clothesline, and we produced a so-called press packet. And so we went to the Holiday Inn for the first announcement, and some of the people here tonight were there. One of the press packets went to a young writer by the name of Steve Aucoin, who was a contributor to the so-called Westbrook American. Steve got a press packet and wrote a story which I think is symbolic of what was to happen later. Because that story essentially said that before a crowd sprinkled with black habits and black faces, Joe Brennan began his quest for the sun. Those of us who remember that day perhaps would be impressed with that sentiment, because as time went on, as he impressed more people from every race, religion, every corner of the state of Maine, more and more people joined up and the campaign or the quest began. Many of those people were young. Many of those people were so impressed and influenced by Joe Brennan that they went on to be city councilors, mayors, select persons, Congress. They became lawyers, judges, bureaucrats in state government, CEOs of large companies and corporations and public utilities. All I can say, and though nobody appointed me to say so, I will only be able to say, Joe, thank you, and we salute you.
Hi, I'm a corporate executive from a large utility. My job is to talk about the years that Joe was Attorney General. And I want to start by, I knew there'd be a lot of complementary attributes that were discussed here tonight, so I thought I wanted to be an exception to the rule. So this is the attribute that was most important to his success as Attorney General. Anti-establishment defiance. He showed that early in his political career when he had the courage to stand up at the '68 convention against the Vietnam War plank being sponsored by the revered Senator Muskie. And he made sure that the Maine delegation was not unanimous in supporting that pro-war resolution. He defied the Democratic establishment then. And he had another chance to do it in a really big, important way when he became Attorney General. Because he presided on his watch over the biggest case in the history of the state of Maine, either before or since. And that was the Indian land claims case. He understood that there was a real link between the economy, the success of the economy of the state of Maine, and the welfare of the people. Maybe some of you here have heard him mention that once or twice. And in the end, when he was governor, he was able to take the satisfaction of seeing that a successful negotiation was achieved, under which the tribes did get some money, but it was all federal money, and they did buy land, but it was from voluntary land sales. Under Joe Brennan's leadership, the jurisdiction of the state of Maine was retained over all of the citizens of the state, and not one penny of taxpayers' dollars and not one square inch of state land was given up in reaching a compromise.
I think we're going to watch a couple of videos.
The fact is, those who are in my office continuing over from Governor Longley's administration are really getting the same salary. Now, the people that you might be talking about dealing with increases would be new people that are hired Governor Longley did as he saw fit, as he should have, to put his administration together. I made my choices. You don't get people to come here to advise you for $10,000 a year. This is a $1 billion budget.
I was privileged to work with Joe as a speechwriter. I succeeded the beloved Larry Spiegel and learned about how Joe loved words. He loved history, he loved poetry, he just really enjoyed the whole experience. And part of it was the Chevreuse thing. You know, he came out with, he would quote Thomas Aquinas, you know, that the words coming from your lips had to match the image that was in your brain. Because truth mattered, and it was important to say what was really going on. And Joe taught me a lot about just writing, about how short words, short sentences, clarity, all that makes, every word you take out makes a sentence stronger, and it's lessons that I've had all my life. And of course there's also, he had a great gift for phrases and rhythm and memorable things, and I think David's mentioned earlier a phrase that Mario Cuomo picked up from Joe and repeated around the country about the best social program being a job. So a lot of people have come to learn a lot, and later tonight I think you'll recall some of that power of Joe's speech. Other?
Connie.
No, that's Connie.
Trish. Well, I have to say that 30 years ago there weren't too many women in government. It is fair to say.
Yeah.
But Governor Brennan decided to right that wrong too. Yeah. And there were a number of women on the cabinet, a number of us. I was 30, and you said I should be the Medicaid director, and I said I can't do that. Yeah. And thank you very much, because you really ignited a passion that's become my career, and it's because of you, and I didn't think I could do it. But I have to say that the gals, most of whom are here, had kind of some competition. There weren't many of us. And the guys used to go and play basketball. And we were sort of left alone, and we weren't invited to do that. And P.S., women couldn't go to a lot of those places then at the Y. So we started to meet alone. Do you remember this, Nancy? We started to meet and have lunch, and then we'd have dinner, and then some of those beverages we'd have. We went off on a whitewater rafting trip, and it was really great. We created a real wonderful sorority of women, thanks to you, women who have had remarkable careers throughout the state and made wonderful, wonderful contributions. And I've called most of them, and I have to tell you, we are now ready to forgive you for never inviting us to play pool.
Finally, I'll tell you about an encounter with Joe Brennan a few years later. Martha and I, my wife, were walking along the Eastern Prom. This is just about 10 years ago. And we ran into Joe and Connie. And he greeted us very warmly, and we had a lovely talk. And he said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "We just moved in up on Quebec Street." And he said, "Really?" And he thought a moment, and he said, and I'm 60 years old at the time. He looked at me and he said, "Well, you know, I got my start here. Maybe you will too." So, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Joe Brennan, the winner in the 1st Congressional District,
is
making his victory speech.
I want to thank the people of the 1st District for reaffirming their trust and their confidence in me. It's been a fun campaign. I've campaigned all across the district, from Benton to Morrow to Shapley to Acton to Biddeford to Portland to Waterville. And I've heard the people of this district talk about the need for affordable housing, for affordable child care, for cleaning up the environment, and for balancing the budget. I have set forth proposals, and I believe that the people of the district have responded. And tonight I want to congratulate Senator George Mitchell on his historic... George Mitchell's future is truly unlimited, and I think the people of this state said tonight, we're 100% behind you, George, and go for it.
That was really fun. I'm Barbara Reinertson, and I was press secretary to Congressman Joe Brennan.
Hi, I'm Nancy Drapo. I first was head field representative for Congressman Brennan, and later his assistant press secretary. I got to know Joe through Dave Redman, and for those of you who know him, he was a little bit rougher around the edges than Joe. But at the core, those two men, their values were the same, and their sense of grit and determination were the same. And we had a good time, didn't we, Barb?
We did. It was great.
We had a lot of fun.
It was fun.
At the same time that it was fun, we worked really hard, but it never felt like hard work. It was a privilege. And simply that, it was a real privilege to get to have the chance to do work that was important, that made a difference.
It was also great because Joe Brennan was never your typical congressman who is, I think, supposed to sort of follow your leaders who've been there for a long time, and he didn't really ascribe to that theory. While congressman, he worked very constructively with leaders of both parties. He also went to Nicaragua, and he talked to people of all kinds, not just the leaders of the country, about the effect that the war we were funding was having on their daily lives. And he came back, and in his first speech on the floor of the Congress, he said, "Who assigned to the United States the right to try to overthrow any government which we disagree with?" And then going back to Maine, which he did virtually every weekend. You may wonder why he's in a white anti-asbestos suit here or whatever. I remember going with Congressman Brennan to a town called Hope, Maine. And they were having terrible problems with a toxic waste dump from a chemical company that had closed down and their drinking water. And he went to look and listen and see if he could help with getting federal Superfund dollars to help with the cleanup. So driving back afterwards, I remember I was just such an excited little press secretary. I was, talking on and on about this beautiful little town hall and the big site with the no admittance signs and the suits you had to put on and the photo opportunities and all the television stations that were coming and how great this was. And finally, when I had wound down, the congressman just very quietly said, "Yes, and we might be able to help some people." So that was Joe Brennan and what he thought a new government service was all about. And I have often thought, especially after these last few years, that I am so grateful that I worked for a member of Congress who stood up for working people, who stood up for reform in government, who stood up for our Constitution and against war. Thank you very much.
So I have one last story to share with you. When I was leaving the congressional staff to go to law school, Joe, in his very nice and quiet way in his office, chats with me and he says, "Listen, Nancy, as you go on, you've got two paths you can take in life. You can choose to take a path where you make lots of money, or you can choose a path where you try to help people and make a bit of a difference." And I think we all know that, Joe, you chose the latter path. And we're all so grateful to you here in Maine as well as elsewhere in the United States for your decision. So thank you, Joe, and God bless.
Governor Brennan, Mrs. Brennan, so it's an honor to be here. Hello, everyone. My name is Ben Tucker, and I came down from Brunswick. My parents, Ralph and Nancy, are here. And I'm here to tell you what Governor Brennan means to me. I grew up in the 70s and the 80s. I got dragged to Joe Brennan Day at Thomas Point Beach, which I thought was a national holiday. Someone in college told me they didn't celebrate it out of Maine. When I was 7 years old, my father went to work for Governor Brennan. And I was incredibly proud that my father was working in Augusta for Governor Brennan. Because to me, Joe Brennan is not a governor. He is the governor. And later on, I was lucky enough to work on some of his campaigns. I was in the Arthur Stilfen Sign Army. I was a part-time driver, and I helped set up events. And I went on, I worked in Washington, D.C., I worked in Boston, and a few years ago I came back to Maine to start a family. I came back to Brunswick. I'm on the town council there. And Governor Brennan embodies integrity, the compassion, and the commitment to social justice that I aspire to live up to. And I want to thank Governor Brennan for his service and for his example. Thank you, Joe.
I didn't understand much about politics when I was a little kid. I knew that it was fun. I could holler. I could shout out, "Let's go, Joe." I could make lots of noise and stay up late. And throughout the years, I realized that, there was a wardrobe that people had to wear. It was Brennan blue. Different shades and variations, but when I talked about Brennan blue, most of the kids at school didn't know what I was talking about. When I did go to Washington through college as an intern for a semester, is when I began to realize that politics was more than campaigning. It was about policy, and I began to appreciate what Joe Brennan stood for at that time. I was inspired to go to law school. Ben forgot to mention he's also in law school, so Joe can be credited with 2 more lawyers. We spent a lot of hours and a lot of days, as hundreds of other people did, working on Joe's behalf so that he could work on behalf of the people of the state of Maine, and we wouldn't change a minute of it.
It's an honor for me to join in this Maine Irish Heritage Center Claddagh Awards ceremony. My only regret is that I can't be there with you in person, but I did want to be there through this message and in spirit, especially since the recipient of this year's award is former Governor and Congressman Joe Brennan. I'm Senator George Mitchell, and I can use that title in front of my name because of Joe Brennan. Joe appointed me to the United States Senate, and had he not done so, I wouldn't be making this tape, and I wouldn't have done a lot of other things that I did do in my life. So thank you very much, Joe, from a personal standpoint. And I also thank you on behalf of the people of Maine, who you served for so many years with great distinction. Joe Brennan's principle in government was best expressed by former Senator Hubert Comfrey, who once said that the moral test of a government is how it treats those at the dawn of life, the young, at the dusk of life, the elderly, and in the shadow of life, the disadvantaged and the poor. Joe didn't just say those words. He lived them. He acted them. Virtually every major step towards social progress and social justice in Maine in recent decades bears his mark and his input. It was an honor for me to serve under Joe when he was the district attorney in Cumberland County, Maine, and it was an honor for me to serve in the United States Senate, to which he appointed me. And I'll never forget what he said to me when he called and told me he wanted to appoint me to the Senate. He said, "I'll never ask you for anything in exchange. I'll never ask you to do anything other than to serve the people of Maine and the nation according to your conscience and your best judgment." Those were the words of a man of integrity and principle, and that's what Joe Brennan was and is, as a public servant and in private life. And interestingly, I've known a lot of public officials. I've never known anyone who acted more the same in private when no one was looking or listening, and in public when everyone was looking and listening. Joe Brennan had one standard, the highest moral standard. It was an honor to serve him and it's an honor for me tonight to join Joe with your many friends, supporters, and admirers in congratulating you on this great honor and wishing you the best of success in coming years.
By the authority vested in us by the Board of the Maine Irish Heritage Center on this 14th day of November, we present to Joseph E Brennan this inaugural Claddagh Award in recognition for his distinguished service to his country, his state, his county, the city of Portland over many years as Governor, Federal Maritime Commissioner, United States Congressman, Attorney General, and so on. State Senator, State Rep, and County Attorney. He has always served with honor, integrity, and distinction. Throughout, he has remained loyal to his values, and he's never forgotten where he came from. Munjoy Hill, and he's never really left. In the words of His Eminence Richard Cardinal Cushing, no higher honor can come to any man than the reward he receives from the service to others. We honor Governor Brennan, and he truly honors us by his acceptance of this richly deserved award.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Governor.
I'll put it down here. Would you like to go up to the podium? Yes.
Hey, I'm going to be mercifully brief. I know how long this has been. But I'm going to take a little bit of time. I want to say that I'm truly honored to be getting this award. And it really doesn't bother me that Ed Kelleher was offered the award first. And it really doesn't bother me that they try to get Jerry Conley to take the award. You know, even though I'm third choice, I'd still enjoy getting it if I was last choice. I don't have many opportunities now to get any awards. And even very rarely do I get a microphone. I want to thank John Doyle and Mary McAleney and Patsy Wiggins and Vinnie O'Malley and all who did so much to make this such a wonderful experience. I really do. I must confess that as a politician, I've often spoke about things that I really knew little about, which is not unusual, frankly, for politicians. Pretenses to the contrary. But Irish heritage is something I know a little bit about because I actually lived it. I want to give you just a little flavor of Irish heritage as I lived it on my journey from Kellogg Street to Munjoy Hill to the Blaine House to Congress. My father immigrated from County Galway in Ireland to Portland. Something special about that, after he got here, he lived in the same house that Henry Wadsworth Longfellow was born in. It was a tenement on 4th Street. And I was kind of proud of that. You know, my family, whatever relatives I had were over in Ireland. I didn't have anybody to brag about, so I kind of bragged about my father was born in the same house as Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. And not the place in Monument Square. Longfellow moved up there, you know, shortly after his birth. Another interesting thing is Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's father was the first congressman from Maine from the 1st District in 1820, the same one I was privileged to serve for a couple of terms. Also in that same house, a very great Maine family, the mother lived in the same house that my father, another tenant. Her name was Cronin. She married a Loring. They had a number of kids. One of them was Charles Loring, for whom Loring Air Force Base is named. Probably the greatest military person that served for Maine. He was given the Congressional Medal of Honor for his action in Korea. The North Koreans were killing a lot of young American soldiers. He had run out of ammunition. He took his jet, he was a jet pilot in the Air Force, right down into the enemy, taking them out, saving maybe hundreds of American young soldiers. But it's weird, it was from the same house where Longfellow was born. My father served as a soldier in the trenches in France during World War I. For his service, and they did this, I guess, to a lot of people, when he was discharged, he was made a United States citizen. I don't think my mother became a citizen until in the 1980s. My father later married my mother, actually in this very church here at St. Dominic's. She also emigrated here from County Galway. They had 8 children. I don't know whether any of them, for example, could become president today because they do not have a funny name. Like my hero, Barack Obama. The children are given those very unusual names, like Mary, actually my oldest sister, who was a nurse anesthetist. In fact, we were quite proud. She was the night supervisor at the Mercy Hospital up the street when she was in her early 20s. My brother Jack, who was a superb athlete. My brother Francis, who served with distinction in Korea during the war over there. My brother Jimmy, whom you've heard about, was a character in his own right and could not have been better involved in so many of my things. My brother Paul has several children. He's one of the great fathers. He's got one daughter now that's working on her second PhD. Take that, Barringer. My sister Kathleen, who has been a teacher for years at the Reiki School here and down in Peaks Island, and continues to do a lot of great social work. And then my youngest sister, Barbara Ann, who's a nun. She's been a nun for about 50 years. You know, in a lot of kids' families, the top job you could have is being principal. She was principal at Cathedral Grammar School. I was quite proud of her. Then she went up to St. Mary's in Augusta, where she served as principal for a good number of years. When she retired, a year or so ago, she had 500 people come to the retirement party. It makes me think when I first ran for governor, 60 people showed up. 40 were my relatives. The rest were Conleys. And again, just another little, give you a flavor. But there were 8 kids and my parents, the 10 of us lived in a 5-room tenement on Kellogg Street. The rent was a grandiose sum of $15 a month. $15 a month, that's like 50 cents a day, I guess. It was owned by the Esposito family, a great family, a terrific family. They, Italian immigrants themselves. And they're well known here because they run these Espo restaurants, but just a great family. I recall very vividly once when they were considering raising the rent from 15 to 16, the mother who did the business for the family wanted to know what would it be fair to increase the rent from $15 to $16 for that family. Later in life, I lived in a place for 8 years, in a house with 19 rooms, half a dozen fireplaces, 6 or 7 bathrooms, access to your own plane, a car, and there was no rent. The Blaine house. That says a lot about opportunity in America. At home, my parents sometimes spoke Gaelic because they didn't know Armenian. My dear friends, the Tavanians. But that wasn't unusual in an Irish household where there were immigrants when they didn't want the kids to know what they were saying. Most Irish parents at that time had simple hopes and simple aspirations for their children. These were to, keep the kids out of trouble, don't have the police come knocking at the door, get them to go to school when they got there, to do their best, to go to church, to find any job they could before or after school, and they generally succeeded. If they were here tonight, I think my father would say, "What's all this, these people talking about you?" My mother, she would have believed it. Now, if you've seen Barack Obama lately, particularly in the last 10 days before the election, there was a very nice-looking guy that was with him a lot of times, almost right next to him, could have been glued to him. His name was Joe Brennan. No. It was my son, and now he's a very veteran Secret Service agent. My daughter, Tara, is in the process of getting her PhD in psychology. I think every Irish family needs somebody in psychology. In New York, where I can assure you there are no $15 a month rents. I have on occasion shelled out close to $2,000 a month for a tiny place in Manhattan. I also want to thank my wife, Connie, who celebrated her 74th birthday yesterday. No. No, that was me. She was 34. And I want to thank her for all the work she's done, and so many members of my family. And it's really difficult in families. I kind of felt bad for them. When I'm between offices, I was running for people that always ask, what's Joe going to do? I mean, their whole life, you take up too much of the space in a family's life when you're a public figure. And my heart goes out to all the answers they had to give. And I thank them from the bottom of my heart for all they've done. Connie, as I said, worked very hard. She actually worked for Mayor Kevin White for a couple of years. And when she came back to Maine, with all the political skills and the political tricks that you learn in Boston politics, she was of immense help. Incidentally, she attended St. Dominic's School, and her three brothers are here who attended St. Dominic's School. In fact, is there anybody here that didn't go to St. Dominic's? And actually, my dear friend Redmond, Dave Redmond, said, you hire her, you pay her, and you get the whole family. And we did, we got her whole family. Actually, when she was working in my campaign, she was paid $150 a week, and she worked about 100 hours. She was making less than $2 an hour, clearly in violation of every minimum wage law, which I'd go around street corners preaching about, but it's well past the statute of limitations again. Not only that, she had an old Volkswagen. She drove around in the winter. The heater didn't work. I mean, it really, because it changes once you get elected. You actually fly places, and you have cars with heaters, and you can almost pay a living wage to people. But I thank Connie for all the terrific work that she has done. And here comes the best part. I'm going to come to a conclusion. Yeah, I got to be careful about that. Once Bill Clinton had a Democratic convention, before he got elected, he went on, and he said, finally, and an applause erupted, the biggest applause of the entire convention, inappropriately so. But I am going to bring it to a conclusion with a little quote from one of my favorite poets, William Butler Yeats, who said, think where man's glory most begins and ends, and say my glory was I had such friends. I'd like to even paraphrase Yeats, rather daring of me. I do it more simply. My wealth is my friends. My wealth is all of you here tonight, and the thousands across the state who have given me everything over the years. And in the spirits of Yeats, I could not be richer than I am here tonight. Thank you very, very much.